In this lesson, we're going to be talking about rates, ratios, and percents. And what I need you to remember is that when we talk about a ratio, we're talking about, well, it looks like a fraction. So maybe something like 3/10, except it's not a fraction. A ratio uses division to compare two numbers. So perhaps we're comparing 3 made free throws to 10 total free throws, if we're talking basketball. Okay, this would be a ratio. It's you comparing free throws, made free throws, to total free throws, but it's free throws to free throws. A rate's a little bit different because a rate uses division to compare two different quantities. So maybe we're traveling 60 miles in 1 hour. That would be a rate. We're using division to compare miles to hours. And more specifically, this is called a unit rate. And it's a unit rate because there's a 1 on the bottom. We usually write rates as unit rates because they make more sense. I could say that we traveled 180 miles in 3 hours, and you'd say, okay, well, how fast were you going? Because we want to go back to a unit rate. Okay? So, but both are ratios, both can use division to compare two quantities, but a rate compares different quantities. Now, if we look at this example here, we have a chart that says estimated spending in U.S. in 1996. No long time ago, but that's all right. And it says we spent $913 billion on medical care, $787 billion on housing, and $602 billion on transportation. What it wants us to do is find the cost per person, assuming the U.S. population was about 266 million in 1996. Now this right here tells you the rate you're going to set up. You're going to set up a rate that is cost per person. If we talk about the medical care, and I'll just abbreviate it MC, if you want to do this problem, you'd say, okay, well, how much did it cost? How much did medical care cost? And it cost $913 billion. Now I'm going to write it out this time just so we don't get confused. That'd be million, 3 more would be billion. And we're going to compare that to the number of people. We're using division to compare cost to the number of people. It tells us the number of people is 266 million. Now if you were to type that into a calculator, remember we can cross out all the extra zeros. Okay, so if you were to type in 913,000 divided by 266, you would get approximately $3,432 per person. Okay, that would be a unit rate. That's how much we're spending per one person. It makes a lot more sense than saying 913 billion per 266 million. We can relate more to this. We do the same thing if we wanted to check out housing. Again, we're going to focus on cost per person. So the cost of housing is 787 billion. And again, the number of people we have is still 266 million. So if we were to divide this out, 787,000 divided by 266, this time it's going to be approximately equal to $2,959 approximately per person. Again, I round a little bit. Okay, because we're dealing with such big numbers and you get a decimal that never ends. And we can do the same thing for transportation. But the way we figure out that rate is to use the information we're given. If we want cost per person, we're going to divide our cost by person. Let's look at another example. It says you have recorded your car mileage and gasoline use for 5 weeks. Estimate the number of miles you can drive on a full 12-gallon tank of gasoline. Now this one requires a little bit of thought. We have to recognize what we want. We want to estimate the number of miles we're going to drive on a 12-gallon tank. Well, when we're thinking about miles and gallons, it's not all the same. We traveled 159 miles in 5 gallons. We traveled 237 miles and used 6.9 gallons. 195 miles and used 6 gallons. So it's a little bit different. Let's come up with an average. Okay, let's come up with an average number of miles per gallon. Now the way we do that to figure out the average the average miles per gallon, is we'd add up all of our miles. So if you take 159 plus 237 plus, so on and so forth, add them all up, you would get 989 total miles. If we do the same thing for the number of gallons and add them up, we would get 30.1 gallons. Okay, so this is our total number of miles, this is our total number of gallons. If we want to find the average, we take our miles, 989 miles, and we divide it by our gallons, 30.1 gallons. If we divide that out, that comes up to approximately, we'll just say 32.9 miles per gallon. Okay. Now we can use that to find the number of miles we're going to drive on a 12-gallon tank. Use this idea of the average being miles per gallon. Miles per gallon, okay, has to equal our average. So, do we know the number of miles we're going to travel? No, we'll call that X. Do we know the number of gallons we're going to use? Yes, that's 12. And do we know what our average miles per gallon we used? Right here, 32.9. So now what we can do is we've set up this equation, we can go ahead and solve it. What are we solving for? X, the number of miles. What do we have to get rid of? The 12, the gallons. It's divided by 12, so how do we get rid of it? Well, you multiply by 12. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. And you can see that, I'm going to put it up here, I apologize for running out of room. The number of miles we're going to travel, if we do 32.9 times 12, we get 394.8. Now, what does that mean? X, remember, tells us the number of miles. So this basically means we're going to travel approximately 395 miles on a 12-gallon tank of gas. Again, it's just an average, but we took our original information, we collected this data, we figured out our average for miles per gallon, and then we were able to set up an equation to figure out the total number of miles. Think through your problems. Recognize what information we've been given and what information we need to solve for.